the most uncomfortable position with your chest on the bulkhead, fair dinkum. I've got a fractured sternum after cleaning the mooring off and doing that all day. I'm sore. I'm going home. G'day everyone, welcome back to Life on the Hulls. Last episode, you'll remember that I flow coated the crush bulkheads in my Catamaran, and ultimately these small incremental steps are starting to paint a picture for you, and you can see here the overview of the entire mess that I'm in, the giant jigsaw puzzle with which I live. There's a lot more to do, and in this episode I'm going to deal with a couple of other things that really need attention straight away, including the water tanks and some of those modules. So don't forget to like the episode, please subscribe if you haven't already done so, and please share it out and watch the whole thing all the way through, and thanks for joining me. Okay, so I've just finished flow coating out both of the bow crash bulkheads. That was a bit of an effort. Took a good day sanding, cleaning, making sure the angles were all dead level and everything, and now it's time to turn my attention down to these water tanks. Now these tanks are going to need to be reinforced on each end of the bulkhead. The end bulkheads are going to need to be tabbed one more tab, and that'll give it four 150mm wide tabs of 600 double bias. And then I've got to wait for that to cure. I'm going to peel ply them, and I've got to wait for that to cure fully before I can add the Tank Guard 412 Jotun potable epoxy paint. So very important that is cured. So all polyester and vinyl ester and everything needs to be cured. Any epoxy needs to be cured before you then apply this Tank Guard product. And the reason why is that you don't want any chemical interaction with the substrate end. Okay, so I've just had a delivery. This is my potable epoxy paint for my fresh water tanks. So it's from Jotun, Australia, and yeah, not sponsored or anything, but it's Tank Guard 412. It is a potable epoxy paint, goes on in 2 or 3 coats. With a roller I can spray it, but I'm not going to because it's just going to be too much mess. But I intend to brush and stripe paint all of the coats, all the corners and the radiuses and the fillets and everything, and then I'll simply roll it. And then you have to be committed to doing a coat every day, every 24 hours. You've got to sort of allow that 24-hour cure, a semi-cure, and then a second coat straight after. There's no point in leaving it 4 or 5 days and then coming back, because if you do that, you're going to end up with a cure, and then you're going to have to start all over again, sand it all back. So I'm here for the next 3 days. I'm going to get them done, and here's my paint. So this Tank Guard 412, it's certified, very important. It comes with a certification, and now that's critical for me because I'm trying to get my boat through survey. Anything that I can buy with a certificate is going to make a big difference at the end of the day. If I can just hand them a piece of paper and say, here it is, certified potable water, I sail through that part of the process, particularly if I've done it correctly, which I intend to. So 2-part, 2-to-1 ratio. It's that simple. It's an epoxy paint. But it doesn't have all the nasties in it that you know, your typical epoxies and polyesters would have to therefore to make it potable. Tank Guard, it's in white so I can see the inside of my tank. I think when I originally ordered they offered me black and red as an option, but I certainly didn't want to have a black water tank. The problem with that is when you're looking in, you want to be able to see mold or any sort of detritus accumulating, and black, particularly underneath the floors of a catamaran, would be very hard to see. So white's the answer. It's a 2-to-1 ratio. It's 1.5 litres and 3 litres, and a 24-hour set time, and then a secondary cure is at 72 hours. So you basically very important that we get this standard, and it's actually a certified, and we can derive a certificate off the internet. They have all the paperwork, and I can just hand that and put that in my surveyor's information, and when it comes time for survey, that'll be a pass. You can see all the black marks here on the chamfer. That's basically my skid marks from sliding down in my boots over the years. I've basically used it as a bit of a ramp. I've become quite agile in here for a big fella. It's amazing how much you can improve your dexterity and your balance by working in a place like this. You tend to get pretty bloody nimble, and I'm like a cat in here. I can climb all over the place without with minimal chance of falling. But let's lift this sole up, let's have a look at what's under, and then let's get to the tanks. So for the baffle, it's got 2 layers, but I'm going to put an extra one on each. I'm just a little bit paranoid about any surface action of the water inside this tank. And furthermore, you can never have it strong enough, and for the sake of one piece of laminate, it's not worth mucking around with. So laminating the ends of those bulkheads is so important, and I'm trying to reduce the effects of free surface effect, essentially that wave action that happens when the boat changes pitch, or if there's low quantities of fluid within the tank, and it'll cause undue stress and obviously resultant noise inside that tank. Morning guys, next day, yesterday afternoon, I put an extra 2 layers of 600 double bias cloth on the end bulkheads of my integrated freshwater tanks. And the reason why I did that is because of the 250 odd litres of fresh water that are going to be inside these tanks. As they get empty, they tend to slosh, and you do get a little bit of surface wave action. Hence the, sorry, I'm standing on the chine here, hence the baffle in the centre of the water tank. Now that's a really important feature. Now it does have a couple of holes in it to allow water to equalise and hopefully take some of that sloshing and that surface action out of the movement of the water inside the tank. But I've done some extra tabbing purely to reinforce it, just because I guess I'm a little bit paranoid. I am pretty confident in its ability to hold water, but a little bit of extra tabbing is never going to hurt. So I'm just going to remove the peel ply. Now I need to let that cure for around about 2 to 3 days before I can put the potable epoxy 2-pack paint on it. It's going to require a little bit of cleaning up, a little bit of sanding, but that 2-pack paint must have cured resin underneath it. If I put it on top of slightly uncured resin, we're talking sort of 72 hours before this vinyl ester clears and cures properly, I could get some gassing through the epoxy, and that wouldn't be good either. So, or some sort of adverse chemical reaction. So important you think about those sorts of things. If you're going to be laying stuff on top of other layers, you make sure it's cured. So especially when you're changing chemistry like I'm going to be doing here. Now that epoxy paint that I bought from Jotun, I've got to put at least 2 layers down within the curing period. So 24 hours after each other, put the second layer down. It's pretty much impervious to chemical attack. It also has no things like benzene and such like in it that makes it drinkable. So I can drink out of it even though I'm still going to put a secondary filter in my fresh water system. So let's remove the peel ply. I'm going to do it on the other side, and then I can basically get on with some other jobs. Okay, so I started filming that about 3 hours ago. I've had about 10 visitors come to have a look at my progress. So sometimes my days can be a bit like that, and I love it because it's, I get to have a chat, and I get to think things through as I explain them to other people. So that sort of helps me with my process. Sometimes it slows me up, but it's a good thing. So we're back here in the water tank. So I'm going to remove the peel ply, and then I'm going to walk away for 2 or 3 days. Come back and finish these tanks out, get them done. So as I get more and more visitors, I get the opportunity to disassemble, assemble, disassemble, assemble, disassemble, assemble as I explain stuff to people. But I'll put this floor back in about 4 times today. But the good thing is I'm going to take this part out, which is under the port shower unit, and I'm going to glass these edges up today, and I'll laminate this up so it's finished, ready to go. It's important you keep a few jobs going at the same time. And that'll get done and strengthen that up. And essentially I've just got to remove these parts, put it in there, and then I've got my water tank to deal with here. once again the peel ply to be removed from this side. Yep, that's all right. And the majority of those tanks, these tanks have already been fine sanded, so all I need to do is essentially just do where that peel ply has sat last night, and by tomorrow afternoon I should have that all sanded ready. It's still a little bit tacky, so I'm going to give it another 24 hours just to cure again, give it a good sand, give it at least another 24 hours or maybe even 48 hours, come in, paint the whole job out, water tanks, done. The only thing I then need to do is the lids. So it's 2-pack. You can see here the ultimate colour is white, but I don't know how they get the white with this coloured catalyst, but you know, once it's mixed in, I usually let it sit for about 5 minutes before I start to apply it, just to let it off gas a little bit. Good idea to let it catalyse completely, because a lot of false curing happens when you don't actually let it catalyse properly. But I'm going to give this a good mix without holding the camera here. Righto, let's get this water tank painted out, eh? That, my friends, is a very good sight to see that that tank whited out. And of course we're a Catamaran. We get to look at a second one as well. So I'll just step over this hurdle here. So we've got over here, look at this. Hey, we're getting there. Look at that. So crash bulkhead's now complete. Flow coat all under the head here, under the forward cabin, and water tank. Pretty bloody happy. And that's layer 1. So tomorrow, after about 24 hours, I'm going to come back and do a second coat on there, and that should be more than enough, and hopefully that's it. And then I'm going to have to probably buy some more to complete the lids, because the lids, I don't think I'm going to have enough, although we'll see how I go tomorrow. It certainly appears I've seriously underestimated the amount of this I'm going to need. I've gone through 4.5 litres here, and I've just finished my second coat, so this is the last of it. This will go onto the second coat on my port side tank. I think I'm going to need probably at least double that to complete my tanks. It's such a thick product, it has to go on very, very thick, and yeah, I've obviously underestimated. So at $250 for what you're sitting there, 250 Aussie dollars, about 170 US. It's expensive stuff. Now, of course, I've left the tops raw because I want to glue the lid down, obviously, but the lid will be completely covered in this stuff except for the margins around where these angles are, where the lid needs to go down. It's not as good as I would like. I mean, the finish is not fantastic on it, but I guess it's a water tank, so it doesn't really matter too much. So it's only going to be closed up, and as long as it sort of serves the purpose and keeps the water out of my substrates, which is vinyl ester anyway, so that's not going to matter. Yeah, pretty happy. So look at that. Oh, it's great. So way back in the day when I first acquired this mould, I got all excited and I wasn't able to sort of get started on the main part of the project. I started doing things that I thought, you know, I'm wondering if I'm wasting my time here. And you tend to waste a lot of time because you're not really sure about how things are going to pan out. What I'm alluding to here is I spent a great deal of time on this stair module and on a lot of the other modules, templating all of these areas for foam. And what I've now come to realise is I don't need foam in all of the places. Some areas are just going to have to be solid glass. Because I've made the module and set it in place, I can tell exactly what needs foam and what doesn't. So with this one here, I know all of these verticals, like this one here and this top one here, I don't need foam there. I can't in fact put foam there because A, it's so curved that I'd have to use contour foam. But the second thing I've noticed too is that I simply don't have the space for that extra foam, given that the hull's already got the 30mm foam in it. So careful reinforcement is going to be the job here. What I'm going to do is make sure that I've got these stair treads here, like this one here and this one here, and essentially those stair treads are going to have to be 20mm foam with a beveled edge, obviously, because I need the strength and the rigidity in the actual stair tread itself, but not so much in the upright or in the vertical part of the step or the back of the step. So the good thing is I've already spent the time here years ago, about 2 years ago, templating all of this. So that's going to save me a lot of time now. So don't ever think you're wasting your time. As long as it's reasonably well guided, making templates is the only way to go. So I'll be able to simply lay these parts over the foam, cut them out, give this module a good sand up, get it clean, and start laying up again. And that's one of the jobs for the next sort of 6 months or so. I think I'll be pulling the modules out, reinforcing them where necessary. Once I get the hull demolded, I'll be able to sit them back in and glue them straight in place. So there's always something to do. There's never a day where there's not a lot of projects to do. This will be quite a fruitful use of my time several years ago when I wasn't quite sure how things were going to work out. Now, all of my internal modules are polyester resin. Now, I know you're all going, oh, don't use polyester. Polyester these days is not like it used to be. It certainly isn't the quality of epoxy and vinyl ester, but there's a lot of advantages to working with polyester. Firstly, it's cheap. Secondly, it does react very well to MEKP, normal MEKP, and with vinyl ester I use a different MEKP. It's actually got Norox, which is a totally separate compound. But this stuff is very serviceable. It's very utilitarian. You can use it for any sort of internal module or anything. You can actually use it outside. I mean, I've got 40-year-old boats that have basically survived, you know, with absolutely no ill effects. But yeah. So that is a beautiful, clean drum of polyester ready to go. And the important thing is with any resin, any chemicals, keep the air out of it as long as you can. So as soon as you top it up, whack the lid back on, whack the clamp on. And then you always have a good supply. I stir it every 2 days or so to make sure that I'm getting a really good chemical reaction. Ready to rock and roll. So today is butterfly stair module. I spent around 3 hours the other day. I've cleaned, I've sanded it, I've ground away any little fibrous pieces that were hanging off it for when I originally laid it up, and it's been in and out of the holes up there for probably about the last year or two. So that means I'm not going to get a chemical bond here. So by cleaning and prepping and keying the surface with a flat disc grinder and hand sanding it, you can now pretty much run your hand over any part of this without getting a shard of fiberglass in there. But so ultimately, the next thing it needs is a quick styrene wipe. Before I do a hot coat of anywhere where I'm going to laminate now, I'm going to do a hot coat of 300 CSM. Why I'm doing that is because I need that foam to bed into the 300 CSM with the bedding compound. That's the key. Is I over catalyze slightly. It is a cool day here. It's only 15, 16 degrees. It's probably 20 in here, and I'm going to get that bedding compound foam to actually adhere to all a million little chopped strands that I'm going to put in this, and then I'm going to lay it up with another layer of 300, layer of 600 over the top, and another layer of 300, and I'm going to end up with a really strong substrate, particularly on stairs. These are actually the treads, so you got to remember this is upside down again, so that's the hatch at the bottom, that's the top. These are the actual stair treads, which need to have a lot of reinforcement, and this is actually the riser. So, or I'm not really sure what you call it, but this part here really doesn't need to be foam core. As much as I'd like to do it foam core, it's going to be very difficult because of the curvature. So I'm going to make that solid glass. It's going to add a bit of extra weight, but that's not really going to be too much of an issue. The important part is that the tread has that real rigidity that I need, so that every time you step down on it, it doesn't spring too much, put extra load on this area here. I'm also going to put some probably 50 mil wide tapes of 600 double bias and 1200 quadraxial on these areas here to make that transition from riser to step incredibly strong, so that every time I, at 100 and odd kilos, steps down onto the step, I don't do this and separate it and end up with stress cracking along this line here. It's going to happen. It happens with all boats. It doesn't matter how good your boat is, you're going to get it over a long period because there's always that stress. But if I can circumvent a lot of it now, why wouldn't you? So I've got a box down here. I've got a box of 300, a box of 450, a box of 200. I've got a box of 100 CSM. Any scrap I get, I chuck in that box, and then I hope to reuse it. Now, that box is overflowing, so it's time to start reusing it. Why would I use perfectly good cloth here when I've got perfectly good cloth in a box? It's interesting how many fiberglass shops I go into and how many places I go to where they throw away all the scraps. You know, little pieces like this, fair enough, but a big piece like that, you're going to reuse it at some point. I'm going to use this. Now, the principle is I hot coat at around 2 to 2.5% one layer of chop matting onto the step that I'm intending to laminate onto or put the foam core onto, and then mix up the bedding compound, put it under the underside of this, and then glue it in. So I've got, not only have I got resin going off it really fast, like at 100 miles an hour, I've then got the foam core bedding compound, then solidifying as a chemical bond into that hot coat. That gives me that maximum adhesion. Once that's done, I can walk away, and then I've just got to trim up around the edges. But for now, I'm just going to make a small template just so I'm ready to do this. I've only got 3 pieces to do here, 4 pieces to do. So if I can do that now, then I can walk away and concentrate on reinforcing other areas while that other stuff's going off, and I can come back and laminate the whole thing at once. You don't have to be too accurate here because you're just looking for something to get underneath the bedding compound, but you do want to make sure that you give yourself a bit of an overlap. It's so important in a shop like this to protect your surfaces. I've got these really nice plywood tables I bought for like 20 bucks each at one of the big box stores, Bunnings or Walmart or whatever you guys like to call it. The issue with them is that they double as our Christmas tables. We've got a pretty big family, and at Christmas time we can have like 30 to 40 people at our place for a 4-day event. And Janet likes these tables to double up as Christmas dinner tables. As a result, I've got to try to keep the resin off them. I don't like to store them at home, so I keep them up here, and they're honestly very good workbenches, but I cover everything in plastic, because if there's a big dollop of resin on the Christmas dinner table, we're in trouble. So, yeah, so very important. I go through a little bit of black plastic. I just buy builder's concreting plastic, and I like to keep my table well protected. I'm always in trouble, guys. I'm always in trouble, but I think we all are, aren't we? This is going to be a pretty relatively simple bit of laminating. Not that exciting. I'll do a GoPro footage from above, but to be honest, it's not exactly that riveting. Simply going to lay down one layer of 300 CSM just to get that hot coat down at 2.5%. I'm going to jack the catalyst right up. Cold day, I want it to go off as quick as lightning, and I then want to put the bedding compound into it to make sure I get a really good chemical bond with that and the foam. Righto, so I'm going to put the sea light onto the foam, glue that down now that I've got my hot coat. That's still really just starting to catalyse, just starting to kick off, and that's when you want to put this bedding foam down. It really makes sure this foam is going to just adhere to it all together and get a real chemical bond with both. And you really got to make sure this stuff gets stirred up. It's very, very difficult. to get it into solution. Okay, so I've probably said this before, when you're catalyzing filled resin like this, and remembering that this is, say, 300 grams or 250 grams of resin in the actual cup, remembering that probably half of that is filler. We don't want to catalyze at the total amount, so I certainly wouldn't be catalyzing 2.5 mils for 250 grams of resin in here. There's probably 130, 150 grams of resin in there and 100 grams of filler. That said, you need to then calculate it based on the volume of the resin content, not the filled resin content. What I don't want to do is have this thing jack off at about 15% just because I've over catalyzed it. I want to catalyze it around 2% so that I then get that hot mix. So this resin here, I'm going to catalyze it at 2% of 150 mils. So go and get your calculators and work that out. Now, a common problem is that often when you're stirring your resin, initially you'll spill all your catalyst and then you're left with an under-catalyzed solution. So you always start stirring very carefully until you get a little bit of that catalyst moving into the solution, and then you can go at it. So you can see there, it's all in the solution now. Now I can go. Now you can see when it's catalyzing, see how it's going white, that means it's catalyzing. The blue is still sort of working through its catalyzing. So that's another way of checking that things are going off properly, is the color indication. And it's a very good thing about polyesters and vinyl esters. They do change color as they catalyze very quickly. So you can see if you've got uniform catalyzing. Take a look at this. The things you got to do, like there's always some heavy resin cans or something floating around, but look at this palaver. I mean, there's only one way to keep that in place. I've got cardboard rolls, I've got boxes of cloth holding pieces of timber in place. That's my clamp and I'm sticking to it. But that's done now. It's been a bit of a bloody effort. It's probably taken me a good hour to get all that down, but I can come back to Savo and clean all of that up with my little Dremel tool, get that radius perfect, and then I'm just gonna be able to glass over that whole lot.